Yay. Hey, hello everybody. So welcome everyone. This is Janet Williams. I'm Marianne Horton. We're happy to have you with us tonight. Janet F. Williams is an editor, writing coach, author, and speaker. She founded her San Marcos business, Good Day Media, in 2010. Her editorial services include development, critique, and copy editing for fiction and nonfiction. She provides one-on-one coaching for writers. She's done it for me. She's great. Who prefer personal attention, and she teaches creative writing. Janet provided coaching and editorial services for my book, Trailblazer. In 2010, she published You Don't Ask, You Don't Get, a self-help communications manual that won 3 awards. She has 2 lesbian romances under her pen name, Zoe Amos, Superior, a futuristic novella, and Talk to Me, which takes place in a fictional San Diego radio station. You can find these and numerous short stories on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. In her spare time, she writes the stories she likes to read. Please visit janetfwilliams.com and gooddaymedia.com.
Thank you. Well, really, I am the one who's honored to be able to introduce Marianne. Is a doctor in the house? Doctor is in. Dr. Marianne Horton is a transgender activist, computer science systems architect, internet pioneer, author, and speaker. In 1997, she persuaded Lucent Technologies to become the first Fortune 500 company to add transgender inclusive language to its non-discrimination policy and to add coverage for transition care and surgery. Her work, which was soon replicated at Apple and Avaya, led Out and Equal Workplace Associates to present her with the 2001 Trailblazer Audi Award. Marianne conducted a research study proving the addition of transgender medical coverage would cost companies virtually nothing. Marianne earned her PhD in computer science from the University of California at Berkeley in 1981, where she invented the email attachment and led Usenet, an early social media network. At Bell Labs, she published Internet Standards for Email and Usenet. Her new memoir, Trailblazer, Lighting the Path for Transgender Equality in Corporate America, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So let's give it up for Marianne. And really what everybody's burning questions, we're going to get to those first. So what is your book about?
So I used to give Transgender 101 workshops. And in those workshops, I explained to people what transgender was all about. And I told my personal story. And my personal story is kind of long and interesting. And it meanders for 20 minutes or so. And at the end of the talks, people would come up and tell me that my personal story was the best part and they wanted to hear more. So finally, once I retired, I had time. And I started writing it down and turned it into a memoir. And the finished product is my personal story at length as a trans woman and as a trans activist. It tells my story, my life from the trans parts of my life, from young to where I am now. And it talks about my activism in the late 90s and the early 2000s in Ohio and at the national level.
Now, that's a lot of information, and that's something to be proud of, but what actually inspired you to write your book?
Well, it's been a wish of mine to have it all written down for a long time. And I'm not going to be around forever. And there's history in here. And the history needs to be written down and recorded. It's something I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to pick up the book if they still have books in the future. And figure out, just who was this weird ancestor of theirs. But I also want to tell the story for other people so that they can appreciate what it was like for trans people in the 90s in Ohio, of all places, which is a little different than California.
Oh, yeah. And a title of a book gives a glimmer of what's going on inside. How did you decide on your title?
Well, originally it was going to be an autobiography. And then once I learned the difference between an autobiography and a memoir, by the way, a memoir is like a slice of your life. The autobiography is the whole thing. And the memoir is more fun to read because it's written better.
It is a lot of fun to read. It is written well.
So it was this award that I received in 2001, and this was for my work with Lucent and Avaya in getting the equal opportunity policy passed and getting the trans health benefits covered on their health plans. That was a first for both of those, and it was important enough that I was nominated for the Audis Award. There's a group called Out and Equal that gives awards every year, and they call them the Audis. And in 2001, I was nominated for the Trailblazer Award, which is the award for the LGBT person who contributed the most that year to workplace equality. And I was blessed to win that award in 2001. So I am a trailblazer, and it's kind of a catchy title, so I went with it.
Yes. And what about the subtitle? You went back and forth on that, too.
Yeah, the subtitle was the challenge. Trailblazer is too short for a title. So I wasn't really sure what to say more about it. I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life. I have gone through a lot of personal growth. I've done activism in the workplace. I've done activism in churches. I've done activism in the LGBT community, getting them to add the T to their mission, which was not always there in the 90s. And I've gone through lots of family stuff as well. So,
The subtitle that you
the subtitle, thank you. So it's a memoir. And I wanted it to talk about the key element, the centerpiece of it all is the Lucent Technologies policy that was passed. And so corporate America, bringing transgender equality to corporate America is important. And that's really the central part of the book. But this is not a business how-to. And some people were looking at it thinking, oh, this is a business how-to book. It's an HR book. HR people should buy it. And HR people should buy this book. But this is a memoir. This is a story of my life. And so we had my quest for transgender equality in corporate America. That was kind of good. And my marketing person suggested, how about lighting the path for transgender equality in corporate America? And I like that. But we had to put a memoir on the cover, just to be clear to everybody that, yes, this is a memoir, and this is not a wonky step one, step two, here's what you do in your company kind of book. Although companies may hopefully get some inspiration from it.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you could write a book about a lot of the different things that you know. Is this your first book?
Well, it's not my first book, it's my first memoir. If you read chapter 1 of the book, you'll discover that there's a section in there about how I was working on my book. And the book that I was working on is this one. My publicist says to always hold it up to the side of my head and not in front of me. Except for the folks on TV, I should do this, right?
That's called the grip and grin.
Yeah,
the grip and grin.
The grip and grin. I'm learning from this expert here. So Portable C Software was my first published book, written by some guy named Mark. And this is a computer technical reference book from 1990. So if you're ever having trouble getting to sleep at night and you need something to put you to sleep, this will do it for you. It's also, as computer reference books go, it's 30 years old, so it's just a little bit out of date. The industry has changed slightly, and I haven't kept it up. So this was published. I've written technical stuff before. I was also the ghostwriter for a VI reference manual, which I did not get credit for, which I was not pleased about because I thought we were going to co-author it. But enough about that. So I've written various technical papers and tech writing kinds of things. I'm reasonably good at explaining how things, how to use a piece of software, how to use some piece of machinery, how to get stuff done. I can explain that. What I'm not so good at is writing fun stuff for people to read. So I had to learn a lot. And boy, did I have to learn. And I have gotten to be a much better writer than I was 4 years ago. And one of the key pieces of being a good writer is having a good editor. And I'm very thankful to have two great editors, one of whom is sitting next to me. The other is Taylor Graham. Both of them made wonderful contributions to this book. And when you read it, I think you'll enjoy it much more thanks to the efforts of Janet.
Thank you. I think it's an entertaining read, and I'm a little bit of a nerd myself. I actually like the techie parts that are left in there. And you bring up an interesting point about the kind of writing, because tech writing is very different from writing other kinds of nonfiction, like a memoir or fiction for that matter. And you can be a plotter or a pantser. And a plotter is someone who plots out the story, and a pantser is someone who just sits down and writes by the seat of their pants. So what was your approach? Were you a plotter or a pantser?
Well, do I even look like I own any pants? I am so much of a plotter that I make the plotters look like pantsers. This is just the way I do technical stuff, so it comes naturally. I started out by writing down a timeline, just basically a bullet point outline of all the major stuff that's going on in my life. And that took a couple of months, and it was like 300 bullet points. And I would sit there on airplanes, but when I had nothing else to do, just going, oh yeah, what about that and this? And put it all down. And then I went through that, and for each one of those, I wrote it out into sort of an autobiography. And this was oh my God, I'm forgetting her name. Anne, the famous writer refers to as a shitty first draft. And Anne Lamott, thank you. Yes, I'm old. I forget names. But it's not well written, but it's all there in its raw form. And then I went through and pulled out what I thought would be the good parts and tried to put it into some reasonable kind of entertaining order. And it went through and edited, did a couple rounds of making it better to read, and then I sent it off to Taylor Graham, my first editor, as a structure editor, and she looked at it and said, okay, this is all messed up. Let's put it in chronological order. We'll move the first chapter is in the middle, that's okay. She deleted a whole bunch of techie stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff that wasn't was too techie. Got it down to too much, but closer to a reasonable length. They say 80,000 to 90,000 words is a reasonable length. The autobiography was 200,000 words. So being selective is good, and there's lots more material for the next one. So anyway, I got that ready to go, or she sent it to me, had feedback. I went through it and did another round of editing. Then it went out for copy edit to a professional copy editor. Then it went to beta readers, and beta readers told me, well, this is messed up. What about this? I really want to hear more about this. So I got lots of feedback from them, edited that, and then it needed another round of copy editing. And before it was ready for copy editing, I needed a lot of coaching on how to do this. And that's when Janet entered the picture. And she coached me through the process and taught me, here's things that you need to do. And with her coaching, I went through and made a lot of changes to the book. Then I sent it to her, and she did an amazing round, actually 3 rounds, I think, of copy editing.
Yeah.
She went over it with a fine-tooth comb 3 times, and it came back great. So then all I had to do was formatting and publishing and marketing and publicity, and I am my own everything.
So often the case with self-published authors. And do you have any other writers in the family who might have inspired you?
I do. My son Matt, he is writing a novel right now, and it's about the first woman hockey player in the NHL. And she's black, which makes it more interesting.
Well, you want to do a reading?
Sure.
And I think this is a good time.
Okay. I have a couple passages.
I'm not from the Portable C software.
Oh, I don't know. I'd like to know about Fort Loops.
Please no. Yeah, we have iPhones, so please.
You don't want me to put you to sleep yet? Okay. Okay, so this section is from 1997, and at this particular time, I'm identifying as a crossdresser. I haven't transitioned yet, and I'm married, and my wife Beth is supportive of me being a crossdresser to a point. And we're also fans of the local Columbus baseball team, the Columbus Clippers. We have season tickets. 1997. I want to go to today's Clippers game. I was in girl mode that day. Beth didn't look up from her book. So change and go. I don't want to change. I want to go as Marianne. Then she looked up. That's one of the few things we have together that isn't about being trans, where we can just relax. I felt deflated. I needed Marianne to be part of everything in my life. I'm wearing jeans. I'll be inconspicuous. I watched her eyes roll. If I sit in another section? Tom sees us and wipes our seats for us. Frida knows the beer you drink. I sulked. She was right that I couldn't be inconspicuous. Not there. I went to the game as Mark. Afterward, I stopped by a favorite spot, the Union Cafe. Sundays could be a slow bar night, so to encourage participation, they displayed show tunes on their TV screens. A VJ played his extensive collection and took requests. The place was packed. To get a prime spot where I could see the big screen, I had to arrive at 6 when it began. Show tunes were cathartic to my soul. I could sit immersed in them for hours. People went there to socialize, but I felt entranced and didn't make good company, although Beth would come too on occasion. I could go as Marianne, and I'd be welcome there. The VJ threw in an Animaniacs cartoon, Yakko's Nations of the World. Yakko danced and pointed to a map, naming off all the countries of the planet. I loved educational stuff, especially for my sons. I thought about the voice and had a wonderful time singing along to the video. I got up to go to the men's room. A young gay man standing next to me at the urinal started a conversation. My friends and I saw you were having a great time watching that cartoon, he said. Yeah, it makes me think of my kids. He looked astonished. You have kids? Yes, I have 2 sons. Do they know you're gay? Well, actually, I'm trans. His eyes widened. You used to be a girl? So this next section is later on that year, actually. I still hadn't transitioned. But I was lobbying in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of trans activists, and we were lobbying our representatives and senators for trans inclusion in what at the time was known as the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, ENDA, which protected sexual orientation and did not protect gender identity. And we were fighting to get gender identity in that bill, thinking that maybe eventually this thing's going to pass, and when it does, we want to be part of it. So we were lobbying for trans inclusion in ENDA, and there was a hate crimes bill we were also lobbying for inclusion in. While lobbying, I met a trans woman who reminded me of first-time cross-dressers from the Crystal Club. Penny Ash Matz wore an obvious wig, had a male-sounding voice, and to me came across as the most visible trans member of our group. Most of the lobbyists were transsexuals, passable to varying degrees. I identified as a crossdresser and wasn't contemplating another step. I thought Penny might be more like me, so I started up a conversation. We hung out that evening and shared our stories. She told me, I live full-time as Penny. I legally changed my name. I have some medical issues, so I can't have sex reassignment surgery. It would kill me. She was the leader of its time Massachusetts and a well-known trans activist in the state. What she said next changed my life. I made a conscious decision not to pass as female. Transsexuals who pass are not helping the cause. Nobody knew they were trans. I chose not to pass on a day-to-day basis. And that way, everyone I interact with knows they met a transsexual. You educate the world one person at a time? I asked her. I make an effort to be nice to people. I feel I'm an ambassador for the transgender community. And by making a good impression, people will have a positive impression of the one transsexual they remember meeting. I really admire you, Penny. The more people who know a trans person, the harder it will be for anti-trans activists to paint us as child molesters. I mulled over Penny's perspective. It's been a great deal of energy trying to acquire passing skills, and it hadn't worked. Despite my best efforts, I sounded male. I'd never been threatened, and I wasn't worried about my safety. Going out in femme didn't change my 6-foot stature or the confidence I projected. I decided Penny's idea was right for me as well. I could stop worrying about passing and focus on education. I made a good friend that day. Penny and I stayed in touch, and I visited her in Boston when I was there for training. I've missed her since she passed away in 2001. To this day, I don't try to pass. I live my life in comfort as my true self. My voice sounds a lot like Mark's. People who know me as Marianne say the higher girl voice sounds faked. It's far more authentic to use the voice God gave me. And I feel I do more good for the world by not passing. I try to be kind and helpful to people I meet. For the next several years, I became the face of the transgender community in Central Ohio. My apologies. The tablet ran out of space in the middle of the recording, and we missed large parts of it. So I'm trying to recreate a few bits and pieces, but this recording is definitely incomplete. Welcome again. Sorry about the outage. So anyway, I supported MIME. I thought it was great, but they were saying that it was the 2007 was the 25th anniversary of the email attachment, which would have had it invented in 1992. I'm sorry, 2017 was the 25th anniversary, 92. And I'm like, wait a minute, we had it before then. So I've corrected the record. And I don't know that, I didn't come up with the word attachment. I don't necessarily claim the word invented, but I certainly created the first email attachment tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite an accomplishment.
So if your email doesn't work, it's all my fault.
And social media. Mark Horton, not Mark Zuckerberg, way back when you created a social media network. What was that called? And what was that about? How did it work?
Okay, so full disclosure, I didn't create it. It was created by 4 guys in North Carolina in 1979. I evangelized it. So they came up with this thing, they called it Usenet, which it was really one of the first social media networks. In 1979, And the idea was that all these computers that were exchanging email by placing phone calls to each other in the middle of the night when the rates were cheap and dropping off the email messages, they could send other stuff as well. So they could send messages back and forth that would be readable by everybody. So they divided the world up into news groups, net news, net.science fiction, net.jokes, etc. And people could read whichever news groups they wanted to. So you'd post a message on one system, it would go work its way around the country, and within a day or two, it was everywhere. And it was this rapidly growing, fun thing. What I did when I was at Berkeley was evangelize this thing and encourage other people to join in. I improved the software a lot. And I connected it up to this other amazing thing called the ARPANET, which was a big deal in the 1970s, but you had to be military or know somebody who was military to get on the ARPANET. So us have-nots didn't have it. But ARPANET had its own social media called mailing lists. And there were 3 or 4 mailing lists on the ARPANET that were lots of fun. There was a science fiction lovers group, there was a telecom group, there was one about human factors called HumanNet, and then there were lots of technical mailing lists as well. And these function just like social media as well. So I spliced the two of them together at Berkeley and caused all this wonderful stuff from the ARPANET to get fed out onto Usenet. And people on Usenet were going, wow, this stuff is great! And it grew like wildfire. And I helped it grow, design the Usenet backbone so that it would be more efficient. At one point, the story was, and this is not true, it's just the story, the claim was that the whole purpose of Usenet was to run up telephone bills and make money for AT&T.
Sounds plausible.
Here's another reading from my book. The Saturday before Easter 2000, I was in a great mood. I decided to shop for a new Easter outfit for church. I didn't put a lot of energy into getting all prettied up. More basic makeup, a green turtleneck top, and matching velour pants. I started at the Eastland Mall food court for lunch. While awaiting my food, I made a quick stop in the nearby ladies' room, which was empty. I picked up my sandwich and scooted for an open table. Before I could sit, a mall security guard approached from the hallway by the restrooms. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you have a driver's license?" he asked. I knew I was in trouble. I carried an ID card from the Crystal Club showing both names and pictures, which I offered to the guard. His smile faded. "No, show me your driver's license." I tried to evade him. "I don't need a driver's license to come to the mall." "You'll come with me now." I had no choice. He led me to a nondescript office down the hall. "It's my 6th day on the job," he shared. "Now show me your driver's license." I complied. It showed my name as Mark Horton and my sex as him. "You are trespassing in the women's restroom. I can have you arrested by the Columbus police." Through my activism, I knew that on private property, it was up to the property owner to decide restroom policy, and most had not addressed it. Social mores dictated using the restroom that matched the sex on your driver's license. "What is the mall's restroom policy?" I asked. "I don't have to show you a policy. I decide what the policy is here," he said. Great, I thought. I'm facing a green, self-important mall cop with an attitude. My annoyance turned to fear. Trans women had been charged with an M1 misdemeanor and up to 6 months jail time for using a public women's room. Going to jail would be a nightmare. I'd be put in with male inmates and probably harassed, beaten, or raped. I decided to play it cool and get out of there at my first opportunity. "Where do you work?" he asked. Lucid Technologies. Do they let you dress like that at work? Yes, they do. What policy have I violated? Stop being argumentative. There was a designated family restroom intended for diaper changes. I thought perhaps he'd want me to use that one. Am I allowed to use the family restroom? No, you are not. He wrote a lengthy report while I sat there. Then he picked up the phone and called the police. By the time the Columbus police officer arrived, I had sweat circles under my arms. The mall cop handed him my driver's license and told him I had been caught in the ladies' room. The officer called in my license number and was told there were no arrest warrants, tickets, or other blemishes on my record. He said there was no reason to arrest me. The officer offered to escort me off the property, and the mall cop agreed. I asked the mall cop, what should I do about restroom use in the future? There will be no future problem in terms of restroom use. I am banning you from the Eastland Mall. May I have a copy of the report you wrote? No. The officer led me out of the office and to my car in the mall lot. I'll follow you off the lot. I drove home, fuming at my mistreatment and relieved to be away from the mall cop.